Shri Isopanisad. Invocation. Om Purnam Adha Purnam Idam Purnat Purnam Uddhachite Purnasya Purnam Adaya Purnam Eva Vashishyate. Translation by Srila Prabhupada. The personality of Godhead is perfect and complete, and because He is completely perfect, all emanations from Him, such as this phenomenal world, are perfectly equipped as a complete whole. Whatever is produced of the complete whole is also complete by itself. And because He is a complete whole, even though so many complete units emanate from Him, He remains the complete balance. Purport. The complete whole or the supreme absolute truth is the complete personality of Godhead. Impersonal Brahman forms an incomplete realization of the absolute truth, complete. And so also does the conception of Paramatma, the super soul. The supreme personality of Godhead is Sachidananda Vigraha. Impersonal Brahman realization is the realization of his Sat or eternity aspect. And Paramatma, super soul realization is the realization of his Sat and Chit, eternity and knowledge aspects. But realization of the personality of Godhead is realization of all transcendental features, Sat, Chit, and Anand or bliss. In the personal concept, this is realized in complete form, Vigraha, and so the complete whole is not formless. If he is formless or if he is less than his creation and any other thing, it cannot be complete. The complete whole must have everything both within our experience and beyond our experience. Otherwise, he cannot be complete. The complete whole personality of Godhead has immense potencies, and all of them are as complete as He is. Therefore, this phenomenal or material world is also complete by itself. The 24 elements of which this material universe is a temporary manifestation are completely adjusted to produce complete things necessary for the maintenance and subsistence of this universe. No extraneous effort by any other unit is required for this maintenance. The universe has its own time fixed by the energy of the complete whole, and when that time is complete, this temporary manifestation will be annihilated by the complete arrangement of the complete. There is complete facility for the small complete units, namely the living beings, to realize the complete. And all forms of incompleteness are experienced only on account of incomplete knowledge of the complete. The human form of life is a complete manifestation of the consciousness of the living being, which is obtained after evolving through 84 lakh species of life in the cycle of birth and death. If a human being does not realize his completeness within the complete in this life of full consciousness, he loses the chance of realizing his completeness and is put again into the cycle of evolution by the law of material nature. Because we do not know that there is a complete arrangement in nature for our maintenance, we make efforts to utilize the resources of nature to create a so called complete life of sense enjoyment. This misleading life of sense enjoyment is called illusion because the living entity cannot enjoy the life of senses without being devoted with a complete whole. For example, the hand of a body is a complete unit as long as is attached to the complete body. When the hand is detached from the body, it may appear like a hand, but actually it has none of the potency of a hand. Similarly, the living beings are part and parcel of the complete whole, and as long as the part and parcel are detached from the complete whole, the illusory representation of completeness is not enough to bring the desired result. The completeness of human life can only be realized when the human form of life is engaged in the service of the complete whole. Any service in this world, whether social, political, communal, international, or even interplanetary, will remain incomplete unless and until it is devoted with the complete whole. And when everything is devoted with the complete whole, the death, part, and parcel also become complete in themselves. This is the mantra 1. ईशावास्यम इदम सर्वम यत् किंच जगत्याम जगत तेना तेक्त्वेना भुजिन्त्यः मा ग्रथा कस्य स्विद्धनम. Translation. Everything animate or inanimate that is within the universe is controlled and owned by the Lord. One should therefore accept only those things necessary for himself which are set aside as his quota, and one must not accept other things knowing well to whom they belong. purport by His divine grace. The Vedic knowledge is infallible because it comes down through the perfect disciplic succession of spiritual masters, beginning from with the Lord Himself. The Vedic knowledge is received from the transcendental sources, and the first word was spoken by the Lord Himself. The words spoken by the Lord are called Apurusha, not delivered by any person of the mundane world. The living being of the mundane world has four defects, which are that he must commit mistakes, he must sometimes be illusion, he must try to cheat others, and he must is endowed with imperfect senses. With these four principles of imperfection, we cannot deliver perfect information in the matter of all pervading knowledge. The Vedas are not known like that. The Vedic knowledge was originally imparted into the heart of Brahma, the first created living being, and the Brahma, in his turn, disseminated the knowledge to his sons and disciples, who have continued the process down through history. The Lord being Puranam or all perfect, there is no chance of his being subjected to the laws of material nature, while the living entities and inanimate objects are all controlled by the law of nature, and thus and ultimately by the potency of the Lord. This Isopanisad is a part of Yajurveda, and such it contains information as to the proprietorship of all things that exist within the universe. This point is confirmed by the Bhagavad Gita in the 7th chapter, where para and apara prakriti are discussed. The elements of nature, earth, fire, water, air, sky, mind, intelligence, and ego all belong to the inferior material energy of the Lord, whereas the living being, the organic energy, is the superior energy, the para prakriti of the Lord. Both the prakritis or energies are emanation from the Lord, and ultimately He is the controller of everything that exists. There is nothing in the universe which does not belong either to the para or apara prakriti, and therefore everything is under the proprietary right of the Supreme Being. The Supreme Being, the absolute personality of Godhead, being a complete person, has the complete and perfect intelligence to adjust everything by its different potencies. The Supreme Being is often compared with fire, and everything organic and inorganic is compared with the heat and light of the fire. The fire distributes energy in the form of heat and light, and likewise the Lord displays his energy in different ways, and he remains the ultimate controller, sustainer, and dictator over everything. He is full of all potencies, the knower of everything, the benefactor of everything, everyone, and is full of all inconceivable opulences, power, wealth, fame, beauty, knowledge, and renunciation. One should therefore be intelligent enough to know that except for the Lord, no one is the proprietor of anything. One should accept only the things which are set aside by the Lord as his quota. The cow, for example, gives milk, but she does not drink the milk. Her milk is designated as a food for the human being. A cow eats grass and straw but does not drink her own milk. Such is the arrangement of the Lord, and we should be satisfied with the things that we have been very kindly set aside for us by Him. We should always consider to whom the things that we possess actually belong. This is very important. We have to know that everything belongs to the Supreme Lord. Take, for example, our dwelling house, which is made of earth, wood, stone, iron, cement, and so many other material things. If we think in terms of Shri Upanishad, then we must know that we cannot produce any of the above mentioned building materials ourselves. We can simply bring them together and transform them into different shape by our labor. A laborer cannot claim to the proprietor of a thing just because he has worked hard to manufacture it. There is always this great quarrel between the laborers and the capitalists in present day society. The quarrel has now taken an international shape and the world is in danger. Men face each other in enmity just like cats and dogs snarling. Shri Shumanishad cannot give advice to the cats and dogs, but it delivers the message of Godhead to man through the bona fide acharya or holy teachers. And the human race may take this Vedic wisdom from Ishopanishad that no one should quarrel over material possession. One must be satisfied by whatever privileges are given to him by the mercy of the Lord. There can be no peace if the communist or the capitalist or any other party claim to be the proprietor of the resources of nature, which are entirely the property of the Lord. The capitalist cannot curb down the communist simply by political maneuvering, nor can the communist defeat the capitalist simply by fighting for the stolen bread. If they do not recognize the proprietorship of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, then all the property which they claim to be their own is stolen, and therefore they shall be liable to punishment by the law of nature. A bomb is in the hands of both the communist and the capitalist, and if both do not recognize the proprietorship of the Supreme Lord, it is sure and certain that ultimately the bomb will ruin both parties. Therefore, in order to save themselves, both must follow the instruction of Sri Upanishad and thus bring peace to the world. Human beings are not meant for quarreling like cats and dogs. They must be intelligent enough to realize the importance of human life and to realize the aim of human life. The Vedic literature is meant for humanity, not for cats and dogs. Cats and dogs can kill other animals for food, and for that there is no question of sin on their part. But if a man kills an animal for the satisfaction of his uncontrollable taste buds, he is responsible for breaking the law of nature, and therefore he must be punished. There is a standard of life for human being which cannot apply to the animals. Tiger does not eat rice, wheat, or cow's milk because it has been given its quota of foodstuff in the shape of animal food. There are many animals and birds who are either vegetarian or non vegetarian, but none of them transgress the law of nature as they have been ordained by the will of the Lord. Amongst the living beings, whether animal or birds or reptiles, there is a strict adherence to the law of nature. Therefore, there is no question of sin for them, nor are the Vedic instructions meet for them. Human life alone then is a life of responsibility. That is very important. It's also wrong to consider that simply by becoming a vegetarian, one can save himself from transgressing the law of nature. Vegetables also have life. One life is meant to feed another living being, and that is the law of nature. One should not be proud of being a strict vegetarian. The point is to recognize the Lord, Supreme Lord. The animals have no developed consciousness to recognize the Lord, but a human being is sufficiently intelligent to take lessons from the Vedic literature and thereby know how the law of nature are working and derive profit out of such knowledge. If a man neglects the instruction of the Vedic literature, his life is very, very risky. The human being is therefore required to recognize the authority of the Supreme Lord. He must be a devotee of the Lord, he must offer everything to the service of the Lord, and partake only the remnants of foodstuff offered to the Lord. That will make him able to discharge his duty properly. In the Bhagavad Gita, the Lord directly states that he accepts the vegetable food stuff from the hands of a pure devotee with love and devotion. Therefore, a human being should not only become a strict vegetarian, but he should also be the devotee of the Lord and offer to the Lord all his food. Only then partake of the prasadam. Prasadam means a mercy of the God. Such a devotee can properly discharge the duty of human life. Those who do not do so are eating only sins, and thus will be subjected to the different types of distress which are the result of various sins. The root of sin is deliberate disobedience to the law of nature, through not recognizing the proprietorship of the Lord. Disobedience to the law of nature or disobedience to the order of the Lord will bring ruin to the human beings. On the other hand, if one is sober and knows the laws of nature without being influenced by unnecessary attachment or abhorrence, he is sure to be recognized again by the Lord and thus become eligible for going back to Godhead, back to eternal home. Okay, the mantra 2. Mantra 2. Kurvan eva karmani didiveshyak chata aham sama evam tvai nanyathatoti na karma lipyate nara. Translation: one may aspire to live for hundreds of years if he continuously goes on doing work in that way, because that sort of work will not bind him to the law of karma. There is no alternative to this way for man. Purport by His divine grace, no one wants to die. Everyone wants to live for as long as he can drag on. This temperament is not only visible individually, but also it is visible collectively in the community, society, and nation. There is a hard struggle for life in every class of living entities, and the Vedas say that this is a quite natural for the living being. The living being is eternal by nature, but due to his bondage in the material existence, he has to change his body from one to another. This process is called transmigration of the soul. This transmigration is also called karma bandhan or being bound by one's own work. The living entity has to work for his livelihood because that is the law of material nature. And if he does not act according to the prescribed duties of his particular life, he transgresses the law of nature, making himself bound more and more in the cycle of birth and death. The cycle of birth and death is present in life other than human form. When the living entity gets the chance for human life, however, it is his chance to get free from the chain of the law of karma. Karma, akarma, and vikarma are principles are very clearly described in the Bhagavad Gita. Action which are done in terms of the prescribed duties mentioned in the revealed scripture are called karma. Action which makes one free from the cycle of birth and death are called akarma. And action which are performed by the misuse of one's freedom, thereby directing oneself toward the lower regions of life, are called vikarma. Of these three categories of activity, the one which makes one from the cycle of further bondage to karma is preferred by intelligent men. Ordinary man wants to perform good work in order to be recognized and to achieve some status of life in this world or in heaven. But more advanced men want to be free altogether from the action and reaction of work. Intelligent men know well that both good and bad works are equally causes of the material miseries of the life. They therefore seek to do work which will free them from the action of reaction of good and bad work. This freedom from good and bad work is ascertained herewith in Isopanisad. The instruction of Sri Isopanisad is better explained in the Bhagavad Gita, sometimes called the Gita Upanishad, the cream of all the Upanishad. The Bhagavad Gita, the personality of Godhead, say that no one can attain the state of Neshkarma or Akarma without beginning the prescribed duties mentioned in the Vedic literature. The Vedic literature can regulate the working energy of the human being in such a way that one can gradually realize the authority of the Supreme Being. When one realizes the authority of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, it is to be understood that he has attained the stage of positive knowledge. At this purified stage of life, where the modes of nature, namely goodness, passion, and ignorance, cannot act, one is enabled to work on the basis of Nesh Karma, or work which does not bind one to the cycle of birth and death. Factually, no one has to do anything more than to render devotional service to the Lord. In the lower stage of life, however, one cannot at once adopt the activities of devotion service, nor can one completely stop reactionary work. A conditioned soul is accustomed to working for sense gratification for its own self interest, immediate or extended. An ordinary man wants to work for his own sense enjoyment, and when the principle of sense enjoyment is extended from the individual to include the collective society, nation, or humanity large, it assumes various attractive names such as altruism, socialism, communism, nationalism, humanitarianism, etc. These isms are certainly very attractive forms of karma, the bondage of one's own work, but the Vedic instruction of Shri Ishopanishad as is follows. If you actually live for any of the above ism, make them God centered. Okay, there is a no harm in becoming a family man, an altruist, socialist, communist, nationalist, or humanitarian, provided all such activities are executed in relation with the Isavasya, the God centered conception. God centered activities are evaluated in the Bhagavad Gita as being so rich that even a little bit of them can save one from the greatest danger. The greatest danger of life is to glide down again into the evolutionary cycle of birth and death. If some way or other a man misses the spiritual opportunity offered by his human form of life, and thus glides down again into the evolutionary cycle. It must be considered the most regrettable incidence, although foolish man cannot see this due to his defective senses. Sri Ishopanishad advises us therefore to exert our energy in the Isavasya spirit. In that engagement, we may wish to live for many, many years. Otherwise, one's long life is no better than the death of a tree, which is also a living being and which lives for hundreds and hundreds of years. There is no point in living a long time like the trees, or breathing like the bellows, or begetting children like the hogs and the dogs, or the eating like the camel. Even humble life with God-centered activities is more valuable than the colossal hoax of so-called altruism or socialism without any relation to God. When activities such as altruism are executed in the spirit of Sri Ishopanishad, every one of them becomes a form of Karma Yoga, as is recommended in the Bhagavad Gita, and that guarantees the executor against the danger of the evolutionary process of birth and death. Such God centered activities, even though half finished, are still good for the executor because they will guarantee him the human form of life in his next birth. In this way, he can have another chance to improve his position on the path of liberation. Mantra 3.